Okay, just while we get started, I'm sure the irony is not lost on you that today I'm talking about colds and flu, and I've been the annoying one at the back who's been coughing uncontrollably, so I apologise for that. What I'd like to talk to you today is about a fruit-based solution to reducing colds and flu in at-risk populations. I'd like to start off just by giving you a little bit of the consumer perspective about foods that have an immune function sort of claim related to them. Traditionally or historically, marketers have tended to shy away from immune-based claims, and this is because they see it kind of as selling insurance. You know, it's like selling insurance. It's something that you know you need and you probably should have, but the benefit of it is not immediately apparent. But over the last couple of years, there's actually been a trend towards consumers being more aware of how the immune system actually contributes to your overall health. So there's been a greater demand for immune products. And this, I'm not sure whether you can see it, just this graph over here just shows that some of the key trends and what people are concerned about for their wellness are starting to creep in about immune function and how to promote it. I beg to differ with Julian this morning. He said that his trends were pretty stable throughout, but imagine my dismay when I saw that the trends for 2011, 2012, immunity had actually slipped off. Because the key trend, key number 9 trend in 2011 was actually immune-based claims. So it is on consumers' minds, although they may not have a full understanding of it. The other problem with developing immune-based functional foods is that the regulatory authorities have also got their eyes on what's required from the evidence that's put forward by people who are developing the dossiers for them. And I'm going to use the European Food Safety Authority as an example here because it's quite recent in that they've given their opinion on what they think is required, and it's also quite stringent, so it's something to shoot for the moon for. What they've said is that they recognise that the stimulation of immune parameters is not necessarily beneficial to health. So you can actually stimulate something in immune function. It may not have an effect on health at all, or it might actually be bad for you. What they would prefer to see is that we can enhance immune responses by showing this in a vaccination model, by vaccinating people, feeding them whatever the product is, giving them a vaccination and showing that the response to vaccination is actually greater. Alternatively, we can show that we can reduce the incidence, severity or relative risk factors of selected infections, and that's the model that we're looking at today. Or also you can reduce the level of pathogens. Immune defence against pathogens may not necessarily represent an effect on the immune system, and they require evidence of a relevant change in immunological parameters as well. Just lastly is that they're also requiring greater wording around immune claims that will be allowed. They need to be well defined now as opposed to something like boosts immunity. It needs to be well defined now, such as defence against pathogens by stimulating immunogenic responses. Okay, so there are a whole raft of nutrients that contribute to the maintenance of immune function. I'm not going to go into any of these in any great detail, but what I wanted to note about this slide was that undernutrition in any of these nutrients can lead to greater susceptibility of infection. And undernutrition is predominantly prevalent in developing countries, but the thing is as well that elderly in developing countries can also be prone to undernutrition, and this is because they may not eat as much, they might be eating alone, they don't prepare themselves proper meals, things like that, so they can quite easily slip into undernutrition. So we need to be wary of this. So just going back to what the consumers were thinking about colds and flu, and we need to ask ourselves whether this is a good immune target for a functional food. So clearly nutritional status is important for maintaining optimal immune function. People commonly undergo some infection of upper respiratory tract infection during a year. In adults, they typically have 2 to 4 infections. Children have 6 to 8. And there's one paper that came out that said preschoolers actually suffer from upper respiratory tract symptoms up to 25% of the time. So it's a real bother to them. If we can address this, we can increase productivity by preventing people having to stay at home, not going to school, not going to work. And importantly, there is also recent evidence to suggest that there's a link between fruit and vegetable consumption and upper respiratory tract infection reduction. So if you go onto the websites that help doctors recommend to their patients what to do, it actually says that one way to help prevent colds and flu is by eating 5+ servings of fruits and vegetables a day. But the good thing about this is that the evidence for this is starting to come through in the literature as well. So there is examples in the literature where people with a greater intake of fruits and vegetables actually have a reduced risk of influenza or colds. And this has been shown both in school children and adults, as well as pregnant women as well, and possibly many others. So we know that fruits and vegetables have an effect. Our question is whether kiwifruit or one specific fruit can have an effect. We're using Zespri Gold kiwifruit in this model because it's an excellent source of vitamin C. It also contains vitamin E. It contains about as much potassium as banana, but about half the calories. It also contains copper and folate and some of the phytochemicals that Andrew was talking about. So in the lead up to showing this in a human model, we did some in vitro and in vivo work first. What we showed was that we were actually able to stimulate immune responses. This was done simply in vitro by looking at the attachment of probiotics and inhibition of attachment of pathogens using a gut cell model, the Keiko 2-cell line. So that shows that it just generally supports good health. We also showed that it was able to protect against oxidative stress-induced cell damage using a T lymphocyte-derived cell line. So that's an immune-type cell line, which is indicative and gave us some evidence to carry the kiwifruit forward. We then went through to an animal model where we were able to show that there was an antigen-specific immune response in animals that were fed the gold kiwifruit. And this was good because it showed that the response was specific and kiwifruit wasn't just generally amping up the immune system, which could be really damaging. And furthermore, we also bled some people and then did some in vitro assays for innate and adaptive immune responses, and we showed some effects there too. So that gave us a really good reason to think that we could carry the gold kiwifruit through to a human trial. First up, we completed a pilot study, and the study was completed between Plant and Food Research, Zespri and Massey University. So we had 32 subjects who were aged over 65 years who actually completed the study. They were given 4 gold kiwifruit a day for 4 weeks, or alternatively they were given 2 bananas, which was our control fruit, because it contained roughly the same nutritive value but didn't have some of the vitamin C and phytochemical content that the kiwifruit has. So they consumed them for 4 weeks, then there was a 4-week washout period, and then they switched over to the alternative treatment, and then they ended the trial. Bloods were collected throughout so that we could follow immune function markers, as well as plasma antioxidant capacity, plasma antioxidant levels, and enzyme activity as well. We also looked at oxidative damage in plasma, as well as some analytes in the plasma, particularly vitamin C and the carotenoid content. Probably the most important part of that was that the people every day throughout the trial, they were asked to complete a survey that tracked their upper respiratory tract symptoms throughout the entire study. So one of the most important findings that we found from the study was from that survey. And what we found that was that when people were on the kiwifruit treatment, they actually had a significantly shorter time in which they were suffering from sore throat and from head congestion. And there were a number of other trends that were heading in the right direction, but as this was only a pilot trial, possibly we didn't have the statistical power to find them significant. But it was good to see that we had two parameters that were affected by kiwifruit. Similarly, we found that head congestion was also significantly reduced in people when they were consuming kiwifruit. And I should also mention that we only measured this in symptoms in people when they were actually suffering from the symptoms. So when they were suffering from the symptom of head congestion, it was reduced considerably when they were having the kiwifruit. We found that there was some changes in the plasma analytes as well. This was important for two reasons. The first is that it was one of the first studies to show that the regular consumption of kiwifruit enhanced the plasma concentration of vitamin C. But as well as that, it was also a bit of an internal control, so it let us know that the people were actually eating the kiwifruit, because a similar response wasn't expected in the banana. And we also found that the kiwifruit consumption enhanced some of the other markers, particularly the lutein, zeaxanthin, and as well as the red cell folate. And the red cell folate and vitamin C are particularly important because they help to maintain immune function, and particularly red cell folate tends to decrease in the elderly, and that can lead them to be susceptible to infection. So this was a good finding. Unfortunately, the changes in biomarkers were relatively limited, but we did get one significant difference. So we found that the level of malondialdehyde, which is a marker of lipid peroxidation, decreased when people were consuming the kiwifruit compared to when they were consuming the banana. So it suggests that we are protecting from oxidative damage to some degree. The mechanism for this isn't clear from these results. Possibly it's a combination of the improvement in quite a few of these markers, although not found to be significant. And finally, the other thing that we noted was some of the immune functions markers in the people, and we found no difference in these between the treatments. Okay, so summary from those findings was that we reduced the length of time participants suffered from sore throats and the length and severity of the head congestion as well. We showed that the regular consumption of gold kiwifruit increased plasma vitamin C in some of the selected carotenoids. And we also showed that the regular consumption of kiwifruit reduced plasma lipid peroxidation. There were some non-significant trends in some of the symptoms that were associated with the colds and flu symptoms. And we also found that there tended to be increased protection from oxidative stress by the form of increased antioxidant capacity and enzyme levels.